Okay, so you just downloaded Dual Universe. You took off from the Ark ship in your rocket-powered space lander. You got a tile on Haven, and deployed your awesome-looking outpost. You visited some cool ships from the comfort of your room with VR. And you got your very first hover vehicle deployed. Nice. So, now what? The intro tutorial sequence in Dual Universe is actually a pretty great introduction to the game's basics. One of the things that it does well is that it doesn't lock you into hours of tutorials. Instead, it lets you explore the content at your own pace. Because there are several systems to learn in DU, this guide is designed to help jumpstart your experience and provide some pro tips along the way. So, let's do it. First up, we have something similar to experience points that we call talent points, except that they accrue automatically at an hourly rate, and you can queue up a list of them to train. However, your hourly rate increases massively if you have talent skills in your training queue, which is why this is the very first thing that I highly suggest that you do right after landing. I would say as a rule of thumb to keep always about 1 week's worth of talents queued up. If you want to do this by following Aphelia's own learning objectives, then you would want to start the talents course at your objective screen. You can find this by going into Improve, Talents, and start the tutorial. Aphelia will walk you through picking a couple of talents just to show you how the system works. There is a talent tree that almost everyone needs, which is your range to accessing containers. So whether or not you want to do Aphelia's version, or if you just want to jump ahead here, press F2. And to find this, we're going to go into our Mining and Inventory, Inventory Manager, and then Primary Container Augmentation. This will give us an extra 250 meters per tier added onto our container range. As we're going to see a little bit later on, this is something that is hugely helpful for anybody who wants to do mining, building, or industry. This does have a prerequisite, so we do need to train this up. The requisite level is listed here, both by the icon and in the pop-up that says level 2. If you have the points to spare, I recommend getting this one right away, and then queue up something else, perhaps piloting. Or, since later in this video we're going to be collecting some surface rocks, you could put some points into surface harvesting. And this actually segues us into the second point, which is your personal objective screen. At the end of the Aphelia intro mission, it's going to drop you off by saying that there is more to do here. And if you are completely new to the game, I actually do definitely recommend that you go through some of these tutorials that are listed. Many of these are going to be game assisted by Aphelia and will walk you through how to do lots of the core functions of the game. Dual Universe has some very complex systems, and doing these tutorials will give you an official intro into most of them. Additionally, some of these tutorials that are in here are actually part of the Surrogate VR station, which brings us on to number 3. Your Surrogate VR station, when you activate it, has 2 additional menus at the top. One of these is Tutorials, which, as I mentioned before, several of these are actually in your personal objective screen as well. However, I also want to talk about Challenges. Challenges are repeatable once per day for some extra Quanta. You can see here the air delivery gives 300,000 Quanta and space delivery gives 225,000 Quanta. On top of that, these are a great way to practice stuff like flying. Especially if you're new to flying in Dual Universe, these are a risk-free way of getting some of that practice in with some bigger ships, because if you die in the surrogate mode, it doesn't matter. I will note though that if you're new to this, then these will take a little bit longer, perhaps an hour or more each. But since these can be repeated on a daily basis, why not give them a try? If all you're looking for though is cash, then let's go to number 4. During the intro sequence, Ophelia is going to get your mining unit started, which is right here. But this is pretty slow, and it takes a while. It can only gather one ore resource at a time. You actually have a lot of raw ore that is all around your tile that you can start scooping up immediately. This is done using the harvest tool. The harvest tool is on my keyboard and probably default for most, the #1 key. You'll notice that as soon as you activate the tool, some of the rocks on your tile are going to begin to glow. This glow effect will help you identify which types of rocks are which resource. So for example, the orange ones here are aluminum, the blue is silicon, the lighter blue is carbon, and the yellow is iron or hematite. To collect these with your harvest tool, you simply hold down left mouse click until it's mined. And you repeat this process for each rock. Across your entire tile, you're going to find that there are a bunch of scatterings of these collections of various resource types that are going to range from mostly tier 1 ores and a couple of tier 2s potentially. And I'm also going to give you a pro tip here. There is an automatic tool mode which you can activate by pressing your middle mouse button. In the case of the harvest tool, the auto mode with middle mouse here is going to automatically harvest anything that my mouse goes over. So instead of having to click, I can simply put the mouse on top of a resource rock and it'll start to mine it. This makes it just a little bit less cumbersome to have to go around mining rocks across your tile and also on other planets. Because the final thing to know about harvesting is that it's not only on your tile, it's actually everywhere. Any tile that you own or that is unclaimed, you can mine these rocks off of the surface. So next, we're going to need a place to store these. Eventually, your inventory will run out. Even after just collecting a few, I'm already at about 10% of my nano pack. Fortunately, your outpost comes with something called a container hub. Mine happens to be right here next to the mining unit, and this container hub, which will say container relay on the visual, actually ties together multiple, control click this to show them, it ties together multiple containers that are scattered across your base and merges them into a single access point. So we're going to find yours, right click it, and set as linked container. Now you can choose to have this hub be your primary inventory. To do that, go ahead and press I to open up the window. Right now you'll notice that there is a check mark on my nano pack indicating that this is my current primary inventory. If I click this link icon over here, it'll say set link container, and the check mark will switch to the linked container. There is also a hotkey for this, which is indicated here, Control I, and if I do Control I, you'll see that the check mark will automatically switch and tell me what I'm linked to. There's also a little pop-up at the bottom of the screen that you'll see flash that tells you which one is now active. So now that you've got some raw ore that you can use or sell, probably the next thing that you want to do is fly to the nearest market. Before you fly though, it's always a good idea to make sure that you have some scrap in your nano pack. Scrap is how you can repair elements that get damaged by crashing your ship or by their destruction. To check this out, close our inventory and press K to open up our Nanocrafter. The Nanocrafter is something that your inventory has, your nano pack, that's able to craft small items without the need for industry machines. Most items in the game, however, like larger items and higher tier items, do require factories with industry machines to craft those. So over in the search box here, let's go ahead and type in scrap, and we're going to get back a list of all the different types of scrap that we can do here. There are more types, but they require higher tier ore. Additionally, you might notice that none of these names are the same as what we have in our inventory. Let me close it out and open that back up. We have hematite, quartz, bauxite, coal, whereas this is aluminum, carbon, scrap, or iron, and silicon. If we go ahead and click on one of these, like for example, I'll do aluminum. Actually, I think I have more iron. You'll notice that's because the required component for this is not the raw ore that we have, but rather it is pure iron, which means in order to craft this scrap, we actually first have to craft the iron. In the bottom side of the menu, you'll see what you could normally craft this in, which would be an industry recycler unit. But we can also do this directly in our Nanocrafter. And to check out what we need, I'm going to click on pure iron. And now we can see that what we need here is hematite. The left number is how much we have in our current inventory, and the right is how much is required per batch. So in this case, 65 liters of hematite will produce 45 liters of pure iron, and it'll take about 25 seconds. So I'll throw a couple of these into my queue, and I'll hit go. You'll also notice that some items will have a byproduct. In particular, purifying will give you back oxygen or hydrogen as a byproduct, which is required in a lot of industry machines later on at higher levels. Next, to get back to our previous menu, there's actually a breadcrumb at the top here that we can use to go back to iron. And I'm going to show you another pro tip, something you can do here. If you control click on a item here or from the menu on the left hand side, control click will take the item and move it into a new tab at the top. So you can keep two different recipes open at the same time, which is particularly useful if you're drilling into a recipe that has several sublayers. So some more stuff before we start flying. Let's actually improve our ride a little bit. In fact, the lander we arrived in is ours, which means that we can tear that thing down for some great parts. In particular, it has medium atmo brakes and space brakes, which are a definite upgrade to the smalls that we currently have. If you enter build mode by pressing B on your lander, and I'm going to select the 1 key, which is deploy element tool. If you hold down Alt while in that deploy tool mode, you'll remove an element instead of adding an element. So I'm going to left Alt and then click, and I'm going to start stripping off some of these elements from our speeder so that we can use them, our lander, so that we can use them in our speeder. So there are ammo brakes at the top there. Space brakes are actually underneath, which to get to those, I'm going to need the maneuver tool, which is going to be in here somewhere. There we go. So I can pick the ship up by clicking and then click again to just leave it in the air. I'll go back into build mode with B, and I'm going to start stripping out some more elements. These are the space brakes, which will be very helpful for when we want to make our speeder go into space later. In general, to be honest, you don't really need the lander anymore once you've arrived, so just tear down the whole thing. In order to save space at the current moment, I'm not going to tear down literally everything for the purpose of this video, but I am going to tear down quite a lot. And I do want to point out that there is a container that is kind of hidden underneath the pilot seat, and this does contain some free scrap. So go ahead and take that scrap and drop it into your container. And then you may as well take that container too. The next thing to note is that regardless of which outpost you chose, they all come with some extra elements that you can use to build up your ship. They're usually going to be lying around in some sort of configuration that's aesthetic. In this case, mine happened to be mostly in the front room. So if I enter build mode on my outpost, and same as before, I'm going to alt click, and I'm just going to start taking out some of these atmospheric elements that I can use. For example, that's an adjuster. I picked up an engine, which is better than most of the engines I currently have. There's actually several small adjusters up here that could be very useful. And even the extra smalls are not bad. There's a fuel tank here if I wanted to expand the amount of fuel that my ship has access to. Some of the outposts will also come with a space fuel tank. This one does not. So you can feel free to strip out the space fuel tank if you want to build something that can go to space. So now I'm going to go back to my ship. I'm going to use the maneuver tool again to lift this up so it's a little bit easier to work on. Then I'm going to go into build mode, and let's put some of these additional elements that we just got onto here. To do this, I'm going to press I to get my inventory open. While I'm in build mode, we'll have a different set of tools down here like we saw before. I want the deploy element tool, which will bring up a little shorthand menu on the right hand side that can store a certain number of elements that you want to cycle through. If you put something into this empty quick access box, that will fill up the list. So for example, I'm going to put the brakes into there. I'm going to put the stabilizer wings that we've got. And I'm going to put the atmospheric engine we picked up, as well as the small adjusters. And probably, I'm just going to throw this box on there too for fun. So now with these items in this menu, I can use mouse wheel to scroll and select different items in the list. There is a whole tutorial on build mode and how to use the different hotkeys, but I am going to run through just a couple really quickly. For example, the R key will rotate the alignment of the engine for placement, and then R key plus mouse wheel will actually rotate it on its current alignment wherever it's locked to. So I'm going to lock it there and just get into a position where it's not red, where it's not obstructed. Next, I'm going to take the atmospheric brakes that I stole off of my own ship. And I'm going to put these somewhere, hopefully a little bit more hidden. Perhaps on the bottom side here, actually, where there's this panel right here. And then the final thing that I need, if I want this ship to actually fly instead of just be a hovercraft, I need to have some sort of airfoil element that is in a horizontal position. Horizontal meaning, if I can get a good line up here, that's close enough. Horizontal meaning something like this, where the wing is pointing outward. The airfoils that your ship starts with are going to be located vertically only because it's designed to function as a hovercraft and not as a flying craft. So to make it fly, we need horizontal airfoils to provide lift. I'm not going to try to be too picky about this. I'm just going to kind of slap some on here and make just an absolutely atrocious looking ship. The next thing to note is that any elements that are engines not linked to a fuel tank will flash to indicate that they are currently not linked. You can link this manually, or if you simply run the auto configure on the ship, it will automatically link it. You would do this by targeting the flight seat for the ship. Oh, I fell. Right click, run default auto configure. Normally it's a ground construct, but now we're going to change this to a flying construct. If you have not yet done any of the flying tutorials in the personal objective screen, it is worth noting that as a flying construct instead of a hover construct, the controls do change. W and S are now pitch controls, so they are not throttle controls. Your throttle is mouse wheel, which will change a percentage that you can see on the right hand side for how much throttle you're currently using. Now that we have some wings to give us some lift, we're actually taking off instead of just sticking to the ground here. The other thing I want to note is that most of the time you will not need more than about 50% thrust to get most of the value of your engines, unless you're trying to carry something heavy. This is also a good time to point out that this HUD that is currently provided, the default, is not the only option that you have. Dual Universe provides a Lua API for programmers to actually add in lots of their own customizations to the game. One of those customizations is your own HUD. So instead of the default, I'm actually going to load up one of mine, which is called the Albatross HUD. You can find that in a link in the description below if you'd like to install it. All the instructions are in that link. It's fairly easy to do, only takes about a few minutes. Once you have the HUD downloaded and inside your game files, we're going to right click on the chair. This time instead of default, we're going to go to Advanced, run Custom Auto Configure, and Albatross HUD 2.12 is the current as of the making of this video. The auto configure will automatically link up everything that it needs.
Albatross systems ready.
And now we have a different interface to fly with. In particular, for the purposes of the stream, I'm actually going to scale this up. Just to make it a little bit easier to read. And let's go ahead and head back to that market. Now that we've arrived at the market, there's a few things I want to point out here. Depending on when you come into the game, items may or may not be for sale by players just yet. However, Ophelia does sell a large list of common items that most players will probably want in order to enhance their ship. For example, if you want to go to space, you can in fact get some basic space engines here. I will note that when you first come up with a search, you're going to see a lot of higher tier items, but none of these will be available directly from Ophelia at the low price. So you want to make sure that you're using the prefix of basic. So I'm looking for a basic space engine. And the largest size that Ophelia sells is going to be medium. So if I click on that, we'll look at the sell orders to see how many are available. You'll note that the sales that are coming directly from Ophelia are going to have millions for sale. And because this is the demo server, the prices here are extremely low. This is not reflective of what you'll see at launch. I'll go ahead and put up a full list of everything that we currently know about that Ophelia will be selling at the market. And this is a nice, easy way if you just want to get some items and go into space really quickly. It's also worth noting that Ophelia sells fuel, and I recommend at the beginning anyways that you wouldn't necessarily want to use your ore to craft fuel yourself. It's going to be pretty much easier and a better use of your ore if you simply buy the fuel from the market. So that would be nitron for atmospheric fuel and ergon for space fuel. So after you've collected some ore and perhaps done the challenges, gotten better at your flying skills, and hopefully put together a space capable craft, the next question kind of just becomes, what do you do next? I'm going to cover just a few of the game loops, things that you can try to pursue and learn more about. I'm not going to go into all of these into great detail because that would take far too much time, and each of these could be a video entirely on their own. But I'll cover the high level just to at least get you started. For example, if you'd like to pursue the crafting side of the game, building up a factory, getting some industry going, then like we saw before, the first place you probably want to start is with the Nanocrafter. The Nanocrafter will give you an idea of what it takes to build certain things, and on this left-hand side, if you uncheck the Nanocraft only, this will help you get an idea for the type of things that you would need to pursue whatever it is that you want to build. For example, if you want to build some bigger and better engines, atmospheric or space, let's say a basic space engine, medium for example, you can see all the components required to build these. And if I go ahead and control click these to get them into their own menus, you can start to see that each of these has their own trees. And it starts to become a pretty nested process. The key thing you're looking for here is what type of industry do you need to craft these? So I would start working on collecting the resources off of my tile by harvesting, and then build up some industry and just start pursuing whatever you'd like to do. Then, whether you're a builder or a crafter, pretty much no matter what you're doing, you're probably going to want some mining units. You'll be able to craft these using mostly the resources from your home tile. I'd recommend getting a few of these set up, ideally one for each resource type that's on your tile, and get those going. The next step, of course, would then be to go off planet and looking for some more rare resource types, which on most planets you'll be able to find some unclaimed tiles, and you can do harvesting with your harvest tool to collect them. Or if you want to pursue the path of building a territory control unit, go and pull that up. One of these are a pretty complex item. For example, you can see that just even crafting the final product will take 8 hours, and that is not including all of the crafting time for the subcomponents. This will allow you to claim tiles on other planets. Once you own a tile, then you can start putting mining units down on anything that you own in order to collect some passive ore of even higher tier types. The next way that you can collect resources is by mining on asteroids. However, in order to actually find an asteroid, you will first need a deep space asteroid scanner, otherwise known as a DSAT. Building a DSAT is a pretty lengthy and intense industry project to undertake. So there are a couple of options here. You can either find someone else who's willing to let you use theirs, or depending on what time you join the game, there will hopefully be people willing to share access to theirs. If you go to your surrogate station, you might be able to find someone who has opened up access to their DSAT by simply searching for the word DSAT. On the demo server, there are none available, but within the first few days of the game going live, there will most certainly be people who are wanting to recruit into their organization who will have public DSATs available. The DSAT will contain a list of public known locations for asteroids that you could then take your spacecraft out and fly to mine. Mining on asteroids does use a different tool set and a different game loop, which we're not going to cover here, but there are tutorials in Affiliate that cover it. The next way that you can earn some Quanta is by running missions. The mission menu, it can be pulled up by pressing F8. And then from in here, there's two different types. There are player-made missions and there are Affiliate-made missions. The Affiliate missions are repeatable. You can do them as many times as you want to, and you can accept multiple missions of different types at a time if you want to coordinate a route that you think is efficient to earn the most Quanta you can. To find these, go to the search icon. There's a list of filters here that you can indicate how much you can actually carry, how much volume you can handle, and what type of distance you would like to fly for. That will then pull back a list that gets reduced on this side, showing all of those metrics, and you can pick up a mission, which will generally require that you fly to the starting planet, typically Alioth, pick up the resources, and then fly them to another location to drop them off. The rewards here are pretty great and a good way to kind of get some Quanta going once you're able to get off of Haven. And the final way that I'm going to cover here on how you can earn some Quanta is through the schematic menu, otherwise Control K if you're not using the tab interface. Schematics are required for industry machines, and one schematic, typically when plugged into a machine, will produce a certain number of batches of an item, and then that schematic is consumed. Because schematics themselves are one-time use things, it can be profitable to generate some of your own during your downtime because these are a time-gated element, and then you can sell your schematics on the market to people who are wanting to bypass that time gate and produce more items immediately. Since many people, and potentially including yourself, will want to get into the industry side of the game, almost every industry element requires the Tier 1, the starting level anyways, Tier 1 medium element schematic, which means there is very likely to be a high demand for this schematic throughout the life of the game. It will cost you 15,000 Quanta to produce this batch, and you'll get 3 of these in return, and it'll take almost an hour to produce that batch of 3. You can create up to 5 queues of different schematic items at a time, so choose how you want to spend your Quanta wisely, and make sure you do check the markets first as well to ensure that the market is not currently saturated with too many of these schematics. But if you have some extra Quanta that you can generate these, then you'll most likely be able to sell them for a profit at the market, and it's a nice another way to make a little bit of passive income in the game. Which kind of brings us to the next tip, kind of the most general and expected tip, which is that for help with any of these things, it's a good idea to go ahead and join an organization. Organizations can be found by pressing F3. And if you want to search for some that you've heard of before, or if you want to just scroll through the list and see who's currently actively recruiting and how many members they have, then this is one such way to do that. You can also find organizations in the official Discord under the recruiting section. Anybody who's actively recruiting will probably have a message posted there as well. I'd like to note that the main organization I am in is Infinity Corporation, and Infinity Corporation is primarily a group of people who look to help other players in the game. So especially if you're new to Dual Universe and you're trying to pick up different aspects, a lot of the people in Infinity Corps are some of the most friendly you'll meet, so I can't really recommend them enough. So if you'd like to check them out, I'll put a link down below. And that brings us to the end of our starter guide. The only thing I haven't really covered, because it is such another massive topic to go into, is the Lua programming side of the game. If you'd like to check it out, there's a couple different resources. Again, I'll have these links down below as well for both open source scripts as well as some scripts you can purchase with Quanta. You can also just check out the API yourself if you want to play around. If you press F1 to open up your help menu, the scripting section at the very bottom, you'll be able to come down here to the Element API and just kind of get a feel for what this API looks like for tapping into all the different elements of the game. Otherwise, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you've made it to the end here, then obviously you must have liked it. Why not go ahead and give the video a like? And if you want to see more content by me talking about Dual Universe and how to play, and I will have some Lua tutorials coming down the line as well, go ahead and subscribe for more videos. You can also catch me on Twitch, where I stream pretty regularly, and I'm answering questions there all the time as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.